What do you say when there are no words? How do you bid farewell to someone you never even knew? So many lives ended on October 7th, every person, a full world, of course. There were so many of them, so many funerals and so many eulogies to be written, and yet so little people left to actually write them. So writers all over the country volunteered to use their own weapon and honor them with the words to accompany all of them in their final journeys. And we're now joined here in studio by screenwriter Tal Miller. Gili Dolev also here with us, and we'll be speaking to you shortly, Gili. And by Zoom, we're also joined by Nili Bar Sinai, who lost her husband, Yoram, in the heroic battles of Kibbutz Be'eri. Thank you, all of you, for joining us on this broadcast. And first, before and after all else, Nili, we are so sorry for your loss. Irony has no mercy, and you were actually writing an obituary to a friend when you got the message on your beloved husband.
Yes, that was. I was in the kibbutz. We write the eulogies, but in a different way. We don't talk about the death, but about the living, and who was the person, how he lived, and what he did with his life. So I was interviewing one of the families, and I was holding my phone at the time because I knew I was expecting the call to hear what happened to him. And when we were talking about the family's loss, so I got the phone and I went to hear that my husband was dead too. But then somebody of the group of the writers volunteered to do the inquiries and write the eulogy.
So yeah, so one of them is Tal Miller, who is here with us in studio. Nili, Tal, it's Nili knows firsthand, but it's so hard to recap the life of a person you know, not to speak about someone you didn't. So where do you start? How do you write an obituary for a stranger?
Well, it's a very good question. I have to say it's weird to say I was privileged, but I feel privileged taking part of this amazing and very painful project. I used to be a speechwriter before I worked as a screenwriter. I never felt it was so emotional like it is now. I feel like I fell in love with people who I never met throughout their beloved ones and the stories they told about them. It's like building a puzzle of someone's life. You get like 40 different questions you need to ask the closest people to the deceased, and then you try to build this story. You ask yourself, how will this person wish to be remembered, and what are the things that you would be most proud of, and you try to build it together with his beloved ones, and it's a very challenging mission.
I'm not sure I'm using the right term here, but both of you, to an extent, professional obituary writers at this point. What would you say is the driving force when trying to write an obituary? Is it the sorrow? Is it the attempt to comfort those who are present at the funeral? Is it the pursuit of creating meaning to the life that are now gone?
Well, it's a very good question, but I agree that the most important thing is talking about life, not only about death. We always say that each individual is a universe, and there were so many universes that we lost in this terrible tragedy. We try to look at their life as like they wish to observe their own life, if it was possible. I believe that a good eulogy is something that can only be written about someone specific, and we try to find the right anecdotes that tell their own story in a way that no one else we can write about anyone else. So that's the challenge.
Nili, so many members of the kibbutz, and we keep on trying to explain to our foreign audiences what a kibbutz means, such a powerful, strong community, and all of a sudden you had to bid farewell to dozens. Overwhelming, can't even describe that.
there were days with 17 funerals. Some of them are parents and 2 kids. And one day was a grandmother and their son and a granddaughter. So this is overwhelming. And because we cannot bury the people in our place, because we are all refugees by now, so we had to put them in temporary places, and they were in succession,
Yeah.
1 hour after another, and this was incredibly difficult for everyone because it was so intense, and families and friends and all over the country, and it cannot be described in words, I think, because also in some of the scenes they were still using bombs around it, and the noises all around.
Yeah, you had to
And all the
bury your
people are
friends while
crying.
the war is still ongoing.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Tal,
And
yes, please, Nili, keep on going. Yeah.
I don't know. You can't describe this, I think, in words. It's only if you take pictures of that or if you videotape, then you can see the amount of flowers and the amount of people crying, and also there are styles in that. It's not all the families take it in the same way.
Yeah.
So although it's in succession, but each funeral is different.
So to that
Because
point,
people are
yeah, exactly. And Tal, to that point, you were forced to find words, and I know it's a tough one, and yet I think that what I would like to ask you the most is what makes a person who is, what makes his life his own, and what makes his death his.
It's a very challenging question, especially when we're referring that tragedy. So many people die in the same day.
Exactly.
Can tell you that I ask myself what will be meaningful for the same individual, for each individual that we are writing about. For example, one of the person I wrote about was religious as a child, and one of the last things he did before he died was putting a Torah book on his pillow just before he died, and that was something that I felt it was meaningful because it related to his own history and biography. I try to look at specific issues that makes this person unique. For example, someone else was colorblind, and that really shaped his entire personality. He could combine different shades that no one would think they are matched, and that was a huge part of the way he looked at himself and the world, and that was a part of the eulogy. So we try to go for the specific issues and anecdote that tells someone managed to portray his life story and his character.
And you've mentioned the word history, and in this respect,
I don't think it's for
maybe.
us. It's not for us to attach meaning to other people's lives. It's for us to describe them and to show who they were. And the story is enough, I think. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be something, a lesson for the future generations. It's just one person who died there. There are no heroes and no ordinary people died there. Ordinary people. So I think it's enough that we take a picture of who they were and respect that.
To honor them that way. And before we thank you both, we cannot ignore the historical gravitas, I would say, of this moment. These obituaries will be remembered for eternity, not just as personal stories, but as stories of this nation. To what extent did you feel like a historian, Tal?
Well, I really agree. I don't look at myself as an historian. I look at myself as a storyteller, and I try to tell the story in a way I examine it, and the way the beloved ones of each individual looked at it. And I think I really agree. The tragedy here is there are so many different stories, and our goal was to portray it, to tell it as accurate as we can, and hopefully we did the best in order to...
You did very well. I can tell you that, because I know the people and I know you did very well.
Thank you so much. And really, I can't, it's really the least we can do as writers, as people in this country right now, to help in this terrible tragedy that it's really still impossible to describe it.
And yet, you were hesitant using this word to describe how you feel at the beginning of the conversation, and yet a privilege to be part of the final phase of their journey. Nili, before we thank you, would you like perhaps to share a month on what keeps you going?
I'm not sure I know, but I think it's being a part of a community that's very strong and very empowering, and this is where I belong, and I take part in whatever is necessary now.
Yes.
So this is what I do.
Sticking together. This is what keeps all of us going. Yeah. Nili Bar Sinai, we're sending a big hug from here. Thank you so very much for speaking to us. We appreciate it. Tal Miller, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.